Welcome to Unleash Leadership, the podcast where bold leaders and changemakers come together to share their stories, strategies, and insights for creating a lasting impact on society. Karla Blanco is your host. For over 28 years, she has been navigating the complexities of the corporate and government worlds, a journey that's taught her that authentic leadership isn't just about climbing the ladder. It's about lifting others as you rise. Along the way, she uncovered the unwritten rules that drive success, the ones no one tells you about, but that can define your career and legacy. On this podcast, she'll sit down with extraordinary guests from around the globe, leaders, visionaries, and innovators who are leaving their mark on the world. Together, they'll explore their journeys, uncover their tips and tricks, and dive into the challenges they've overcome to inspire you to excel in whatever you're facing. Whether you're climbing the corporate ranks, building your personal brand, or leading change in your community, this podcast is your space to grow, learn, and unleash the leader within. So grab a notebook, get ready to take action, and join us on this journey to unleash our leadership potential. Before we dive in, make sure to follow Karla on Instagram, LinkedIn, at Karla Blanco Coach, Karla with a K, and YouTube at Karla Blanco Show to stay connected and get even more leadership tips and updates.
Today, we are diving into an inspiring conversation with an incredible leader who's making waves and creating meaningful change. I'm thrilled to welcome Frank Sanders, Vice President of System Supply Chain and Technology. He leads an international team that runs operations for a multi-billion-dollar global supply chain, which has been in the top 20 for 20 consecutive years in Gartner's Supply Chain Top 25. With pivotal roles at Cisco, Amazon, and Intel, Frank champions diversity and innovation across the technology industry. He holds advanced degrees from top universities such as MIT and Stanford, and is committed to fostering growth within Intel and the tech industry. Frank lives in Arizona with his wife and 2 children. He is an example of leadership and excellence. I can't wait for you to share your insights. This is going to be a conversation full of wisdom and inspiration. Welcome, Frank. It's an honor to have you here in Unleash Leadership podcast.
Well, I'm really glad to be here. It's amazing what you're doing, and really looking forward to just having a conversation and jointly sharing based on our experiences.
Really appreciate your kindness of sharing with me and the audience about your journey. Let's deep dive on that. Tell us about your experiences. So, how your personal and educational experiences from renowned universities like Stanford University or MIT shaped you as a leader.
Yeah, so I will say that for me and the time that I spent at Stanford and MIT, those were more leadership development. But the educational experience that impacted me most was when I was doing my engineering education. And when I reflect on that, the one thing that really stands out to me is really how difficult and challenging it was. And the recognition that it wasn't about how smart you were, but more about what kind of grit you had, what kind of determination. When you had days where you were discouraged, how you got up and came back fighting the next day. Interesting enough, but my daughter actually she just finished her first semester of engineering school at Purdue.
Oh,
And she just got home on Wednesday. And so it's been great just to kind of have a conversation with her and reflect a little bit. But that was the one thing I was telling her. I said, there'll be times when you'll study really hard and you'll get to an exam and you'll say to yourself, wow, that doesn't look like anything that I saw. And I said, I remember those times thinking, why do they take students to do this, things like this? But I said, for me, the thing that I reflect on now that I recognize, it wasn't just about the learning. It was really about the grit, because that's really something that's really been with me throughout my entire career, no matter what the challenge, what the problems, what the issues are. Just the ongoing determination to know that I can solve the problem and I can be successful.
That is so exciting. You are a problem solver, and of course, as an engineer, and your daughter is so exciting that she is on that path too. So to
Yes.
create solutions for the world,
Mhm.
that is so exciting. Thank you for sharing about the importance of grit and strengthen our resilience, because I think that shape us and really strengthen us for when challenges come.
Mhm.
Can you share about any challenge that you thought, oh wow, this is something that I was not ready for?
I'll tell you, it's funny. You were asking about the educational experience. I'll even step back and share an experience that was pretty profound on me in shaping my leadership. It happened before I actually went to the university to study engineering. The summer before that, I had actually gotten a internship and a scholarship from a company that was local in my hometown, and I was quite excited about it. First job, didn't really know what to expect, and I go to the job, and for the first several days, I remember just being extremely bored because they had no project for me. And I would go in every day and ask the boss, "What do you want me to do?" He'd say, "Hey, go read some magazines." And after a while, they got pretty old. And so I eventually was pretty proud of myself because I took the initiative to engage somebody who was also an intern, but they were much more seasoned intern. They were an upperclassman, had interned at this company for several years, and so they knew the ropes. And this person was more than happy to give me some of their work or to help engage me to help them with their projects. And so that made me feel really good. We get to the end of the summer, and we were working with a group of about four engineers, and so they took he and I to lunch, and they paid for his lunch, and they didn't pay for my lunch. Yes, and so that made me kind of feel a little bit strange,
Mhm.
not very good. And then a couple days later, the whole department had a recognition event for all the interns, and so the department head invited every intern up one by one, and of about a dozen interns, I was the only one that he forgot to invite up. Well, at the end, somebody whispered over and reminded him, and so then he called me up and he introduced me as the only intern to have ever worked for another intern in the history of the company. And I vividly remember I was the only intern, if I recall correctly, of color in that whole group. And so when I went up to get my recognition, I just remember feeling like this big and really feeling proud that I got the opportunity because I felt like I was representing my community. And yet, despite the fact that I felt good about taking the initiative, doing some valuable work, when I got recognized at the end, they made me feel like this big, if you will. And one of the things that really helped me with from a leadership standpoint is at that point in time, I kind of said to myself, I will never ever make anybody else feel that way.
Mm.
I don't care if they're an internship. I don't care if there's somebody that's new in their career or experience. I would treat everyone based on their potential. And by the way, you never know. And what I mean by that is you never know what somebody will ultimately become. And your engagement with them may be the spark or the inspiration that they need to ultimately achieve their best. And yet, my case, that interaction made me go the other way, if you will. And so, after being successful in my career and thinking to myself, it's like, wow, um, they didn't necessarily view me, I guess, as somebody who was worth investing or treating differently, if you will. But yeah, for me, I always kind of said, you never know who you're engaging, where they're going to go. And so you always really need to treat people the same way. And then the other thing for me was I felt like I'm never going to be put in a position where people feel like they have to laugh at me. And so for me, I always motivated myself to be always prepared to show up in the best way that I possibly can, so that again I could never be in a situation where I felt really ridiculed.
Oh, wow. That is a great learning moment for all of us, because we as humans need to lead from where we are, and just ensuring that we create safe spaces and
Mhm.
inclusive spaces for everyone, because we are stronger together and we thrive together. So we can't leave anyone behind or make them, especially when they are on an internship, feeling disheartened because they were excluded. So,
Exactly. And when you're in an environment, as you know, I think one of the most important things is making people feel like they have a sense of community, that they're connected. If you really want people to show up and do their best, right? It's like having that sense of belonging, if you will, in that environment, in that situation. Obviously, I didn't feel that way.
mhm.
Definitely felt very much excluded.
Yes. Well, those experiences really help us learn. Same happened to me when I was on my early years in the career. I went into a business meeting, and my manager from US told to another colleague, I told my husband that I have a Sofia Vergara, me,
Hmm.
on my team. She's gorgeous. And I told her, thank you. I think she is an amazing entrepreneur. And they started laughing, to
Hmm.
your point, and I laughed with them. I didn't realize, Frank, how that will impact me. But later, when I moved to US, like 10 years later, I found myself being quiet and not sharing my opinions or
Hmm.
my thoughts. And I was like, why is this way here and in Costa Rica? Then I realized, oh, well, that probably impact me, and I need to take ownership and go make
Hmm.
mistakes, but talk.
Absolutely.
Yes, so we really need to be careful of each other and really support. But also that really made me think about from where your inclusive leadership comes,
Hmm.
and you are an advocate for diversity and inclusion, and also not only diversity and inclusion in supply chain, in general in
Hmm.
life. So can you share about your perspective on that, and maybe also a little bit about environmental sustainability, because I
Hmm.
know that those are two core elements in your leadership.
Yes, I think, first, when you think about the importance of diversity and inclusion in a workplace, and the reason I've been such a strong advocate, some of those things do stem from my personal experience, but also stemming from the fact that a clear recognition of the joint value that can be had by really making people feel like, again, that sense of belonging. And for me, working on high tech, if there's one thing that I really enjoyed, it's really having the chance to work with people from all over the world, from all walks of life. And people come in many cases, they have English is not their primary language. They have different realities based on where they grew up and so on and so forth. And there's value in trying to create a common sense of connection, if you will, because if you don't, to your point, people don't always speak up. I had a conversation one time with one of my employees, and I told him, I said, when we sit down one on one, I said, you have brilliant ideas, but I noticed that when we're in staff meetings, you never say anything. And what he told me was, he said, "Well, Frank, one thing you have to realize is that because English is not my primary language," he said, "oftentimes I have to interpret what's being talked about and discussed. And by the time I get to a point where I have the right understanding to chime in, everybody's moved on to the next conversation." And so that made me a lot more aware to start making sure that there was pause, there was pulling people into the conversation, but only having the level of comfort to have that open conversation was that realization ever achieved, if you will. And so for me, it's just the pure recognition that different people, different walks of life, you have to create environments for people to connect. And when you do, it really enhances the value that the organization can deliver because everybody is being able to bring something to the table based on what they need to enable that to really maximize the value. And then you talked about sustainability. I think a couple things, right? We talk a lot about ESG, E being the environmental piece. as being the social piece, one thing for me, from a broad environmental standpoint, working in a function where um, there's a critical focus in really recognizing that when you look at waste streams, you look at contribution to the environment, there's a lot of contributions, if you will. And one of the things that I've been proud of is some of the work that I've done, like early on, to really normalize and understand that even if you're talking about things that look like they're different, at the end of the day, you can break those things down to a common measure when you look at like carbon footprint as an example and normalizing that. And I did some really good work early on in my Intel career to not only do that inside the company, but actually use that as a leadership opportunity for other companies in the ecosystem. I think we were leading in that space. The other thing I was going to talk about is supplier diversity, more on the S side. And several years ago, um, the one thing that the Intel CEO at the time recognized was that supplier, or not supplier, but diversity and inclusion, critically important for our whole ecosystem, the whole industry. Because if we weren't able to attract the best and the brightest, based on gender, and all the other things that we kind of use to kind of define diversity, at some point in time, we would start losing ground because those best and brightest would start pursuing other things. And so it really kind of felt like we had to drive a lot more inclusion, in that there's an announcement and commitment made at CES around Intel and our contribution. But one thing that I recognize was that a lot of companies, when they were responding to their diversity track record, they were talking a lot about their supplier diversity. And many of these companies had a strong track record of driving impact in that space, and yet at Intel, it hadn't necessarily been a key focus. And so, based on my role and what I did, me and my organization kind of recognized, hey, here's a way for us to contribute to our broader efforts in this space. And so, when we started, we baseline just based on the data and the measurement, and we recognized that wait, we're not that good. Our numbers were actually relatively low, in the low hundreds of millions of dollars, and we recognize that hey, when you look at the leaders across various different industries, those companies are driving impact in the billions of dollars. And so, true to fashion, like at Intel, we established a very challenging goal to get to $1 billion in 5 years, and yet we didn't have a path and understanding of how to get there. And so I'm proud to say that working across the organization, engaging a lot of folks in the industry, a lot of peers, just share benchmarking, best practices, and so on and so forth, we actually got to that $1 billion mark ahead of schedule. And,
Amazing.
and even after I left, really proud of the team because they kept going and eventually significantly exceeded that $1 billion mark.
Well, thank you for
Mhm.
that because that is a global footprint and that is so impactful. So I know that definitely that is part of why you have been member of these companies as Intel, Cisco, Amazon, and also they are part of the 20 top companies for 20 consecutive years of Gartner's supply chain top 25. So, would you say that there is a direct connection with those kind of initiatives, or what are the impacts that these top companies are creating?
Yeah, that's a great example. And again, to your point, at Intel, we talk about being in the Gartner top 20 for 20 consecutive years, and it's identifying opportunities to really drive innovation in supply chain. But for me, having a chance to go also work for other companies, Amazon and Cisco, who are also top supply chain companies annually, you get a sense and understanding of hey, what's the same and what's different. And I'd say definitely have learned things that has contributed to not only my approach in terms of just opportunities from a supply chain, but also from a leadership standpoint. And I was at Intel for like 28 years before I actually left. And one of the reasons why is because I really felt like I wanted to challenge myself to see what it would be like to work in another organization. Again, leveraging my supply chain background, but also too learning more about what's different in that environment. How do you be successful from a leadership standpoint? And they were all uniquely different. Amazon, as an example, the way I would characterize some of the key things that I identified as differences was definitely an organization that was customer obsessed but quite agile
Mhm.
and had the um, um, they had the agility to really move fast when necessary. They had a principle around like one-way door versus two-way doors, and two-way door was essentially, hey, you don't have to necessarily do analysis paralysis because if you get it wrong the first time, you can always step back and then fine tune.
Mm.
And so, as you know, sometimes you get to a point where you're just overanalyzing and you never start. And so that was something I really appreciated and learned from that environment. Cisco was more of an engineering, sales driven culture, but it was really enabled by what I would describe as focus and investment on people. Really a strong environment and culture around empowering people. They consistently ranked as one of the top companies in terms of like employee feedback, as an example. And then Intel, for me, is really a company that has always been known for making the impossible possible, um, taking on hard things, um, and really being able to execute and deliver. And I think even now, when you think about the environment and our strategy, a lot of major challenges in front of us, but at the same time, too, just for me, a lot of confidence just based on what I've seen in the past. I think this is a company when it gets focused on something, it really, really knows how to go and execute and deliver, even if it takes a while to go do that. And so for me, having those multiple experiences and bringing those all back, it's like I feel very strongly about the possibility of thinking enabled by the understanding when we can go fast, as well as the importance of inspiring people to go deliver. There's different ways that you can lead people. One way that you can lead people is through fear.
Mhm.
And what I learned very clearly at Cisco is that you can be quite effective, and I think even more effective by actually inspiring people in the heart, if you will, to go and drive breakthrough things as you're solving problems or driving the business forward.
Well, that is so uh, inspiring how you put together all those pieces, and all those pieces are part of your personal brand as a leader. That is so great. Are there any mentors that you would like to refer to, things that you learn from them?
Yeah, I've had. Oh yes, I've had the privilege of having a lot of mentors over the years. One person who was a very early mentor, very inspirational, was a guy by the name of Ralph Gillespie at Intel. And one thing that Ralph taught me, and I've always carried this throughout my career, been very instrumental even as I kind of engage inside of Intel and externally, was this whole concept of R before the I, relationship before the issue.
Nice.
And what Ralph was always a strong proponent of is, hey, in any given situation, especially when you're really doing the kind of things that we do at Intel, you're going to have conflicts, you're going to have disagreements. But if you have a built relationship as a foundation, it really enables you to focus on the issues objectively. It really allows you to not make things personal when you're trying to solve problems, and you can really get to the problem at hand a lot more effectively and a lot more efficiently.
That is great advice, because definitely when you connect with people at that level, you will accelerate results because you build trust, and that
Yes.
is so important. So tell me about your team, and the different teams that you have created throughout your career. What are there any moments of proud that you would like to
Oh
share?
my gosh. I have. So one thing I tell people is the one measure of success that I use is the people that I've had a chance to manage, mentor, and to see them going to be successful. And I've been so blessed because there's so many people that I've watched and just watched them flourish and do wonderful things inside the companies that I've been at, but also outside the companies as well. And sometimes it really takes helping people to see. around the corner, if you will. I always tell people the best leaders are not necessarily those who come to the table with solutions, but know how to ask the right questions, know how to get people to really think on their own, think about themselves, and think about what's important to them. I oftentimes tell people, hey, the most important thing is to think about you, what's important to you from a success standpoint. Never let anybody define success for you. That's a personal thing. You have to define that for yourself. I mean, oftentimes somebody might look at you and say, oh, yeah, I think you should be this. I think you should be that. But that may not be what drives you. It may not be the thing that makes you happy. So fundamentally, you have to be the one that really internalizes and say to yourself, hey, what am I really passionate about? What I love doing? If I didn't get paid, what could I do where time just passes because it doesn't really feel like work to me? And then you kind of align that to what are you good at, right? And sometimes you have to ask people who know you and who will transparently tell you, because sometimes you don't always see things the way other people see, and you miss opportunities to really identify some key strengths that you may have. But for me, just being able to engage so many people, have those kind of conversations, coach them, mentor them, and then ultimately just see them go off and do wonderful things. That for me is the number one thing that I use to measure my success. And I'll tell you, based on that, I feel like I've been extremely successful.
I know you. You've been extremely successful. I've been your fan for so many years.
Well, thank you,
Yes, because
and
of
vice versa.
and thank you because of your heart and the kind of leader that you are and your legacy. Thank you for that, Frank, because you are changing the world one person at a time of everyone that is around you.
I
So
appreciate that.
that's really inspiring. And well, thank you for your time with us. And I would like you to close sharing what Unleash Leadership means to you.
Unleash leadership, right? Unleash leadership. When I think about leadership, um, and I think about effective leadership, it's something that you really can't touch, but you can feel it, right? And I talked about different styles of leadership, and when you think about leadership at the heart, it's really in my mind being able to get people to do something, but get them to do it in the right way. I oftentimes look at um, a leader who steps in and, say, for instance, takes over a situation from a bad leader, whether it's in business or better it's in sports, and seeing the same organization, the same group, and all of a sudden you just start seeing the results that are completely different. And so for me, it's unleashing leadership is really around how do you drive through feeling, um, self motivation, self passion to enable people to do stuff that they didn't believe they could do, to achieve results and goals and things that were well beyond their original belief.
Oh, thank you for that. I definitely think that I wish every new manager will take coaching classes, because I think what you are mentioning, you are an amazing coach because you really ask the right questions for people to find their own answers and flourish. So that is very inspiring.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for being with us. And well, cheers to your success because you are expanding your legacy in the world.
Well, cheers to your success, because you're going to have so much impact you already have. Your book is amazing.
Thank you.
And I know that through the leaders that you bring to the world, you're going to continue to amplify that impact.
Thank you, Frank.